hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The champagne flowed freely as I surveyed the grand ballroom of our mansion. Laughter and the soft clink of glasses filled the air, mingling with the string quartet's melody. Our annual charity gala was in full swing, and as always, Victoria and I played our parts to perfection. "Alexander, darling," Victoria's voice purred in my ear. Her hand slipped into mine, fingers intertwining. "The Minister of Finance is eager to discuss your latest venture." I turned, drinking in the sight of my wife. Her emerald gown hugged every curve, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. To the world, we were the epitome of marital bliss, powerful, wealthy, and devoted. "Lead the way, my dear," I replied, allowing her to guide me through the sea of designers and tuxedos. We stopped to chat with various guests, a tech mogul here, a famous actress there. Victoria laughed at all the right moments, her charm turned up to 11. I marveled at her ability to make everyone feel like the most important person in the room. As we approached the minister, I caught a flicker of something in Victoria's eyes. Anticipation, nervousness. But it vanished so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. "Minister Chin," I greeted warmly, shaking his hand. "I'm glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Alexander," he replied. "Your galas are legendary. And of course, the chance to support such worthy causes." We fell into easy conversation about my company's latest clean energy initiative. Victoria stood by my side, occasionally adding insightful comments that showcased her own business acumen. I felt a swell of pride. We truly were a power couple. The sudden hush that fell over the room caught my attention. I turned to see what had caused the disturbance. Olivia Sinclair glided into the ballroom on the arm of her husband, Senator James Sinclair. Her crimson dress was a stark contrast to Victoria's emerald, and I couldn't help but notice how heads turned to follow her progress. "I didn't realize the Sinclairs were on the guest list," I murmured to Victoria. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on my arm. "A last-minute addition," she said, her voice controlled. "Olivia called this morning, said they'd had a change of plans." I studied my wife's face, noting the slight tension around her eyes. There was clearly more to the story, but now wasn't the time to pry. "Shall we go welcome them?" I suggested. Victoria's smile never wavered. "Of course." As we made our way across the room, I watched the interplay between Victoria and the Sinclairs. There was a moment, brief but electric, when her eyes met James. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Olivia James," I said warmly. "What a pleasant surprise." Olivia air kissed Victoria's cheeks. "We couldn't miss the social event of the season, could we?" Her laugh tinkled like crystal. "And of course, it's for such a good cause." James shook my hand, his grip firm. "Alexander." "Victoria, you've outdone yourselves this year." I noticed his gaze lingering on Victoria a beat too long. She, in turn, seemed hyper-aware of his presence, though she maintained her poise. "You're too kind," Victoria replied. "We're just happy to do our part." The conversation flowed, but there was an undercurrent of something. Tension? Secrets? I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I filed the observation away for later consideration. As we moved to mingle with other guests, a woman I didn't recognize approached. She was older, elegantly dressed in a simple black gown that spoke of old money and refined taste. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice low and cultured. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "Evelyn Blackwood." I shook her hand, intrigued. "A pleasure, Ms. Blackwood. Are you new to our little circle?" Her smile was enigmatic. "Oh, I've been around for quite some time. Just observing." There was something in her tone that put me on edge. "And what have you observed, Ms. Blackwood?" She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "That things are rarely what they seem on the surface, Mr. Hawthorne. Even the most perfect facades can hide cracks." I frowned, about to press her further, when she continued. "Your wife, for instance. Such a lovely woman. But I wonder, do you truly know her? What are you implying?" I demanded, my hackles rising. Evelyn's eyes glittered. "Nothing specific, Mr. Hawthorne. Just a friendly warning. There are hidden truths in this world that could shatter everything you hold dear. Be vigilant." Before I could respond, she melted into the crowd, leaving me with a growing sense of unease. I scanned the room for Victoria, spotting her deep in conversation with a group of socialites. As if sensing my gaze, she looked up, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. She excused herself and made her way to my side. Alexander, what's wrong? I debated whether to share Evelyn's cryptic warning. I just had a rather interesting conversation with a woman named Evelyn Blackwood. Do you know her? Victoria's reaction was instantaneous. Her body stiffened, and a flash of what looked like fear crossed her face before she schooled her features. Evelyn Blackwood? She repeated, her voice tight. What did she say to you? Her reaction only heightened my suspicions. Nothing specific, just some vague warnings about hidden truths. Victoria, what's going on? She laid a hand on my arm, her smile brittle. Nothing, darling. Evelyn is an old acquaintance. She has a flair for the dramatic. Pay her no mind, but I could see the strain around her eyes, a slight tremor in her hand. Whatever Evelyn had alluded to, it had clearly rattled Victoria. Before I could press further, Marcus Reeves, my business partner, appeared at my elbow. Alexander, a word? His tone was urgent. I nodded, turning back to Victoria. We'll discuss this later, I said quietly. She gave a terse nod and turned away, her posture rigid as she rejoined the party. Marcus led me to a quiet corner of the ballroom. His usually jovial face was drawn with concern. What is it, Marcus? I asked, my earlier unease growing. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I didn't want to bring this up tonight, but there's something off with the Shanghai deal. I frowned. We've been working on this investment for months. It was set to be our biggest expansion yet. What do you mean, off? Marcus glanced around, lowering his voice. The numbers aren't adding up. And I've heard whispers. Someone might be trying to sabotage us from the inside. That's a serious accusation, Marcus, I said, my mind racing. Do you have any proof? He shook his head. Nothing concrete. But we need to be careful, Alexander. We might need to take drastic measures to protect our interests. The implications hung heavy between us. In our world, drastic measures could mean a lot of things, not all of them strictly legal. I nodded slowly. I'll look into it. Discreetly. For now, let's keep this between us. As Marcus melted back into the crowd, I stood alone, my mind whirling. The perfect evening I'd envisioned had turned into something else entirely. Secrets and shadows seemed to lurk in every corner. I caught sight of Victoria across the room, laughing with a group of guests. But now I saw the strain behind her smile, the tension in her shoulders. What else was she hiding? As the gala continued around me, one thing became clear. Nothing was as it seemed, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The morning after the gala, I woke to an empty bed. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating Victoria's untouched pillow. I frowned, listening for any sound of movement in her sprawling penthouse. As I made my way down the hallway, I heard Victoria's voice, low and urgent, coming from the study. I paused outside the door, which was slightly ajar. No, you listen to me, she hissed. We need to be careful. Alexander's starting to ask questions. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer, straining to hear. I don't care about your timeline, Victoria continued. We need to focus on keeping quiet and destroying any evidence. If this gets out, we're both finished. My mind raced. Evidence? What the hell was she involved in? Just handle it, she snapped, followed by the sound of a phone being slammed down. I quickly retreated to our bedroom, my heart pounding. By the time Victoria appeared, I was dressed and sipping coffee, feigning normalcy. Good morning, darling, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Sleep well? I nodded, studying her over the rim of my mug. Like a log. You? Oh, you know me, she laughed, a brittle edge to the sound. Always up with the sun. As she busied herself with making tea, I watched her closely. The woman before me suddenly felt like a stranger. How long had she been keeping secrets? And more importantly, what exactly was she hiding? I've got an early meeting, I said, standing. Don't wait up tonight. It might be a late one. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. Another late night? That's the third this week, Alexander. I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. Big deals don't close themselves. You know how it is. As I left, I could feel her gaze boring into my back. The tension between us was palpable. At the office, I threw myself into work, trying to focus on the tasks at hand. But Victoria's phone conversation kept replaying in my mind. Mr. Hawthorne, my assistant's voice jolted me from my thoughts. Your 10 o'clock is here, and Miss Monroe asked to see you when you have a moment. I nodded, straightening my tie. Send in the 10 o'clock. I'll catch up with Lisa after. The meeting dragged, my mind only half present as we discussed quarterly projections. As soon as it ended, I made my way to Lisa Monroe's office. As our head financial analyst, if anyone could shed light on Marcus's concerns, it would be her. Lisa looked up as I entered, her usual smile replaced by a worried frown. Alexander, thanks for coming. We need to talk. I closed the door behind me, taking a seat across from her desk. What's going on, Lisa? She pulled up several documents on her computer, turning the screen so I could see. I've been going over our financial statements, and, well, things aren't adding up. My conversation with Marcus flashed through my mind. What do you mean? Lisa pointed to several entries. These transactions here, they're listed under vague descriptions, but the amounts are substantial. And here, she pulled up another document. These expenses don't match any of our current projects. I leaned in, studying the figures. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I recognized a pattern. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, Lisa replied, her voice tight. Maybe longer. Alexander, I hate to say it, but this looks like embezzlement. I finished. Lisa nodded, her face pale. What do you want me to do? I stood, my mind racing. Keep digging, but keep it quiet. I want to know everything, where the money's going, who has access to these accounts. But Lisa, I fixed her with a hard stare. This stays between us for now. Understood. She nodded, her expression resolute. Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. You can count on me. As I left Lisa's office, my phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Where are you? We need to talk. I ignored it, my earlier suspicions roaring back to life. Was Victoria somehow involved in this financial discrepancy? The timing of her secretive phone call this morning suddenly seemed far from coincidental. Over the next few days, a new pattern emerged. Victoria became increasingly agitated, her mood swinging between clingy affection and sharp suspicion. Who were you talking to just now? She demanded one evening, appearing in my home office doorway. I looked up from my laptop, surprised by her tone. Just wrapping up some business with Marcus. Why? Victoria's eyes narrowed. At this hour? What kind of business requires such late-night calls? The kind that keeps our company running, I replied coolly. What's this about, Victoria? She entered the room, her movements tense. I feel like you're pulling away. Like you're hiding something. The irony of her accusation wasn't lost on me. I could say the same about you. I countered, watching her reaction closely. Victoria flinched, then quickly composed herself. What's that supposed to mean? I stood, closing the distance between us. You tell me, Victoria. The secretive phone calls, the mood swings. If anyone's hiding something, I'd say it's you. For a moment, fear flashed in her eyes. Then her expression hardened. You're being paranoid, Alexander. I think you're working too hard. Maybe we should take a vacation, get away from all this stress. I almost laughed at the transparency of her deflection. A vacation? No. With everything going on at the company, Victoria reached out, laying a hand on my arm. Surely the business can survive without you for a week or two. We need this, Alexander. To reconnect, I studied her face, searching for any hint of sincerity. All I saw was desperation, but for what? To save our marriage, or to distract me from whatever she was hiding. I'll think about it, I said finally, gently removing her hand. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish. The hurt in her eyes almost made me waver. But as she left the room, something was very wrong, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. The next morning, an email notification pulled me from a fitful sleep. I reached for my phone, squinting at the bright screen. The sender was anonymous, the subject line blank. With a sense of foreboding, I opened the message. My blood ran cold as I scrolled through the attached photos. Victoria, meeting with James Sinclair in various secluded locations. Their body language spoke volumes, the lingering touches, the intimate glances. The final image showed them locked in a passionate embrace, leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. I sat up, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to confront Victoria immediately, to demand answers. But the more calculating side of my brain urged caution. If Victoria and James were involved in something bigger, something tied to the financial irregularities at my company, I needed to tread carefully. As I showered and dressed for work, I formulated a plan. I would gather more evidence, build an ironclad case before making my move. Victoria and James had no idea I was onto them, and I intended to keep it that way for now. At the office, I was surprised to see Olivia Sinclair's name on my schedule. She swept into my office at precisely 10 a.m., looking every bit as polished as she had at the gala. Alexander, she greeted warmly, taking a seat across from me. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I leaned back in my chair, studying her carefully. Of course, Olivia. What can I do for you? She launched into a pitch about a new charity initiative, but I could sense an underlying tension in her demeanor. As she spoke, I noticed her eyes darting around the room, as if checking for listening devices. That sounds like a worthy cause, I said when she finished. I'd be happy to have my team look into it further. Olivia nodded, but made no move to leave. She fidgeted with her bracelet, clearly wrestling with something. Is there something else on your mind, Olivia? I prompted gently. She took a deep breath, her expression conflicted. Alexander, I'm not sure how to say this. I leaned forward, my interest piqued. Whatever it is, I assure you it will stay between us. Olivia met my gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. It's about Victoria. And James. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Go on. Olivia leaned forward, lowering her voice. I think they might be involved in something illegal. Something big, Alexander. And I'm afraid it might be connected to your company. I felt a chill run down my spine. What makes you say that? She hesitated, glancing at the door. I've overheard things. Conversations between James and Victoria that didn't make sense. They mentioned large sums of money offshore accounts. And your company's name came up more than once. I nodded slowly, my mind whirling. I appreciate you telling me this, Olivia. But why come to me? Why not go to the authorities? Fear flashed across her face. I can't prove anything. And James, he has powerful friends. If he found out I said anything. She trailed off, her implication clear. I understand, I said, my tone reassuring. Is there anything else you can tell me? Olivia shook her head. Not right now. But I'll keep my eyes and ears open. If you decide to look into this further, I want to help. Just be careful, Alexander. I'm worried about Victoria. I think she might be in over her head. As Olivia left my office, I sat back processing this new information. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was time to take action. I stared at the business card in my hand, weighing my options. Derek Walsh, pivot investigator. His reputation preceded him, discreet, thorough, and not afraid to bend the rules to get results. With a deep breath, I dialed the number. Walsh, a gruff voice answered. Mr. Walsh, this is Alexander Hawthorne. I have a job for you. We arranged to meet at a nondescript diner on the outskirts of town. As I slid into the booth across from him, I studied the man who held my future in his hands. Derek Walsh was unassuming in appearance, middle-aged, slightly overweight, with thinning hair. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. So, Mr. Hawthorne, he said, sipping his coffee. What can I do for you? I laid out the situation, keeping the details vague but emphasizing the need for absolute discretion. I need you to tail my wife, Victoria. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she meets, especially any interactions with Senator James Sinclair. Walsh nodded, his expression neutral. And if I find something unsavory, I want to know everything, I said firmly. No matter how ugly it gets. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll get started right away. You'll have my first report in 48 hours. As I left the diner, I felt a mix of relief and dread. There was no going back now. The next morning, Victoria dropped a bombshell. I'm going on a vacation, she announced over breakfast. Just for a week or two. I need to clear my head. I looked up from my tablet, keeping my expression carefully neutral. Oh, where to? She waved her hand vaguely. I'm not sure yet. Maybe the beach, maybe the mountains. I just need some time alone to think. Every instinct screamed that this was more than a simple getaway. Is everything all right, Victoria? For a moment, vulnerability flashed across her face. Then her mask slipped back into place. Of course, darling. I just need a break from the social world. You understand, don't you? I nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. Take all the time you need. As soon as she left the room, I texted Walsh, updating him on this new development. His response was immediate. On it, the next 48 hours were agonizing. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the gnawing worry in my gut. When my phone finally buzzed with Walsh's message, I almost dropped it in my haste to read the report. What I saw made my blood run cold. Victoria hadn't gone on vacation at all. Instead, she'd been meeting James Sinclair at a series of upscale hotels and secluded restaurants. Walsh's photos left no doubt about the nature of their relationship, the lingering touches, the intimate glances, the passionate kisses stolen in darkened corners. But it was the other evidence that truly shook me. Walsh had managed to obtain recordings of their conversations. They spoke in hushed tones about wire transfers, shell companies, and laundered funds. My company's name came up repeatedly, along with figures that made my head spin. I sat in my office, staring at the damning evidence before me. The woman I loved, the woman I'd built my life with, was not just betraying me personally. She was actively working to destroy everything I'd built. A knock at my door jolted me from my thoughts. Mr. Hawthorne, it was Lisa, my financial analyst. I have those reports you asked for. I waved her in, trying to compose myself. What did you find? Lisa's face was grim as she laid out a series of documents. It's worse than we thought, Alexander. The embezzlement goes back years. Millions of dollars, funneled through a complex network of shell companies. And sir, she hesitated, her voice dropping. All the transactions were authorized using Victoria's credentials. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I felt a cold rage building inside me, replacing the shock and hurt. Thank you, Lisa, I said, my voice steady. I need you to compile all of this evidence. Every transaction, every document. Can you have it ready by tomorrow morning? She nodded, her eyes wide. Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. But what are you going to do? I stood, straightening my jacket. I'm going to save my company. And then I'm going to destroy the people who tried to ruin me. As Lisa left, I made another call to Walsh. I need you to keep monitoring Victoria and James. I want to know their every move. You got it, boss, he replied. But listen, there's something else you should know. I've been digging into James Sinclair's background. This isn't his first rodeo. He's been involved in similar schemes before, but he's always managed to weasel out of any consequences. He's got some powerful friends in high places. I absorbed this information, my mind racing. Understood. Keep digging. I want everything you can find on Sinclair's past dealings. That evening, I returned home earlier than usual. Victoria was in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, staring out at the city skyline. Alexander, she said, startled by my presence. I didn't expect you home so early. I poured myself a scotch, studying her over the rim of my glass. I thought we should talk. Victoria's smile faltered. Oh, what about? Your vacation plans, I said casually. Have you decided where you're going yet? She shifted uncomfortably. I'm still weighing my options. Why do you ask? I set my glass down, fixing her with a hard stare. Cut the act, Victoria. I know everything. The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? The affair with James. The money laundering. The embezzlement from my company. Did you really think you could hide it all from me? Victoria's composure crumbled. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. Alexander, I can explain. Save it, I snapped. Look, I've seen the evidence. The photos, the recordings, the financial records. It's over, Victoria. Tears streamed down her face. You don't understand. James, he manipulated me. He threatened to ruin me, to ruin us if I didn't help him. I didn't have a choice. I laughed bitterly. There's always a choice. You chose to betray me, to betray everything we built together. Victoria's demeanor suddenly shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold calculation I'd never seen before. You're right, Alexander. There's always a choice. And now you have one to make. She stood, her voice steady. If you turn me in, if you expose this scheme, I'll make sure you go down with me. Or have you forgotten about your own past indiscretions? The insider trading in Dubai? The bribe to secure that government contract in Singapore? I felt the blood drain from my face. How did she know about those? Victoria pressed her advantage. I have evidence, Alexander. Enough to destroy your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for. So here's your choice. You help me cover this up, or we both go down in flames. We stood there, locked in a battle of wills. The woman I'd loved, the life we'd built, it had all been a lie. But could I risk losing everything I'd worked for? As I stared into Victoria's eyes, I saw no trace of the woman I'd married. In her place was a stranger, cold and calculating. And in that moment, I made my decision. You're right, Victoria, I said softly. There's always a choice. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad. I stare at my phone, Victoria's ultimatum ringing in my ears. The weight of her blackmail pressed down on me, but I refused to be crushed. With a swift motion, I pocketed the device and grabbed my coat. Where are you going? Victoria demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. I turned, meeting her gaze with steely resolve. Oh, I need to think. The cool night air cleared my head as I strode through the city streets. My mind raced, formulating plans and discarding them just as quickly. I needed an ally, someone I could trust implicitly. There was only one person who fit that description. Marcus answered on the second ring. Alexander, what's wrong? We need to talk. No? Meet me at the usual place in 20 minutes. The usual place was a small, dimly lit bar tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. As I slid into the booth across from Marcus, I saw the concern etched on his face. What's going on, Alex? You look like hell. I took a deep breath and laid it all out: Victoria's betrayal, the money laundering scheme, James Sinclair's involvement, and the blackmail attempt. Marcus listened intently, his expression darkening with each revelation. When I finished, he leaned back. Jesus, Alex. This is big. What are you going to do? I'm going to take them down, I said, my voice low and determined. All of them. But I need your help. Marcus nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need. We've been through too much together to let these bastards win. We spent the next hour outlining a plan. We'd need to move fast, shoring up our defenses while gathering evidence against Victoria and James. As we talked, I felt some of the weight lift from my shoulders. With Marcus by my side, I had a fighting chance. As we were about to leave, a familiar voice caught my attention. Mr. Hawthorne, I believe we have some unfinished business. I turned to see Evelyn Blackwood sliding into the booth next to us, her expression unreadable. Ms. Blackwood, I said cautiously. This is a private conversation. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oh, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. Especially if you're planning to take down Victoria and Senator Sinclair. Marcus tensed beside me, but I held up a hand. Go on. Evelyn leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not who you think I am, Mr. Hawthorne. My real name is Sarah Evans. I'm a former intelligence operative, and I've been investigating a criminal network that your wife and the good senator are deeply involved in. I exchanged a glance with Marcus, seeing my own shock mirrored in his eyes. Why are you telling us this? Because I need your help, Evelyn or Sarah replied. And from what I've overheard, you need mine. This goes far beyond simple embezzlement or infidelity. We're talking about a global operation with ties to... My mind reeled at the implications. How do I know I can trust you? She pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. With a touch, a holographic display sprang to life, showing a web of connections linking Victoria, James, and dozens of other names and organizations. This is just the tip of the iceberg, she said. I can help you bring them down, but we need to move carefully. One wrong move, and we're all dead. I studied her face, weighing my options. Finally, I nodded. All right, we're in. What's our next move? Sarah's eyes glittered with determination. First, you need to play along with Victoria's demands. Make her think she's won. Meanwhile, we'll set traps, gather evidence, and turn their own game against them. As we left the bar, our alliance forged in secrets and shared purpose, I felt a satisfaction settle over me. Victoria and James had no idea what was coming for them. The next few weeks were a delicate balancing act. I returned home that night, feigning defeat and agreeing to Victoria's terms. The relief on her face was palpable, but I saw the calculating glint in her eyes. She didn't trust me, not completely. Good. It would make her careless. I threw myself into the role of the cowed husband, all the while working with Sarah and Marcus to unravel the threads of the conspiracy. We set up dummy accounts, planted false information, and slowly began to turn Victoria and James against each other. One evening, as Victoria prepared for another business dinner with James, I decided to push things further. You seem tense, I remarked casually, sipping my scotch. Trouble in paradise. Victoria's hand froze as she applied her lipstick. What are you talking about? I shrugged, keeping my tone light. Oh, nothing. Just wondering if James is holding up his end of the bargain. He does have a reputation for, shall we say, changing allegiances when it suits him. Her eyes narrowed. James and I have an understanding. Unlike some people, he knows the value of loyalty. I had to stifle a laugh at the irony. Of course. My mistake. Enjoy your dinner, dear. As she left, I saw the doubt I'd planted take root. It was a small victory, but in this game, every advantage counted. The next day, I received a frantic call from Olivia Sinclair. Alexander, I need to see you. It's urgent. We met in a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. Olivia looked terrible pale, with dark circles under her eyes. I can't do this anymore, she blurted out as soon as I sat down. The lies, the schemes. I want out. I leaned forward, my voice low and urgent. Olivia listened to me. It's not safe for you to talk about this here. We don't know who might be listening. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know. But James, he's out of control. He threatened my family, Alexander. My children. I don't know what to do. I reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm working on a plan to bring them down. All of them. But I need you to hold on a little longer. Can you do that? Olivia took a shaky breath, then nodded. I'll try. But please hurry. I don't know how much more of this I can take. As I watched her leave, I felt a pang of guilt. Olivia was as much a victim in this as anyone. But I couldn't let sentiment cloud my judgment. There would be collateral damage in this war, and I had to be prepared for it. The deeper Sarah and I dug into the money laundering operation, the more horrified I became. This wasn't just about embezzlement or political corruption. We uncovered links in a network of shell companies that span the globe. My God, I muttered, staring at the web of connections Sarah had mapped out. How deep does this go? Sarah's face was all the way to the top. We're talking cabinet members, judges, even foreign dignitaries. One wrong move, and we could start an international incident, feeling the weight of what we'd uncovered. So what's our play? We need to be smart, she replied. Surgical. We can't take down the entire network, not without more resources. But we can cut off the head of the snake. We spent hours strategizing, identifying key players and weak links in the organization. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. My suspicions were confirmed the next day when I received an urgent message from Lisa. Mr. Hawthorne, you need to see this. I met her in a secluded corner of a public park, away from any potential surveillance. Lisa handed me a flash drive, her hand shaking. What am I looking at? I asked as I scrolled through the documents on my secure tablet. It's a paper trail, Lisa explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Victoria and James, they're planning to frame you for the entire operation. They've fabricated documents, created false evidence. According to this, you're the mastermind behind everything. I felt a cold fury settle over me. They're getting desperate. Good. That means they're scared. Lisa looked at me, her eyes wide. What are you going to do? I pocketed the flash drive, my mind already racing with possibilities. I'm going to beat them at their own game. Thank you, Lisa. You've been invaluable. As I walked away, I made a mental note to ensure Lisa's safety. She'd proven her loyalty, and I protected those who stood by me. Back at the office, I received an unexpected visitor. James Sinclair strode in, all false smiles and oily charm. Alexander. I hope I'm not interrupting. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. Not at all, Senator. What can I do for you? James settled into the chair across from me, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed malice. I wanted to discuss a potential business opportunity, something that could be mutually beneficial. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, do tell. As James laid out his proposal, a thinly veiled attempt to further entangle me in their schemes, I played along, asking the right questions and showing just enough interest to keep him talking. It sounds intriguing, I said finally. Why don't we set up a meeting next week to discuss the details? I'll have my team run some numbers, see if we can make this work. James grinned, clearly thinking he'd hooked me. Excellent. I'll have my assistant set it up. As he left, I allowed myself a small smile. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. I immediately called Sarah, filling her in on the development. Can you arrange for an undercover agent to be at that meeting? Consider it done, she replied. But Alexander, be careful. If they suspect anything, I know the risks. I cut her off. But this might be our only chance to catch them red-handed. The next few days were a flurry of activity as we prepared for the sting operation. Sarah worked her connections, arranging for a seasoned federal agent to pose as our potential new partner. I briefed my team, making sure everyone knew their roles. The night before the meeting, I received a text from an unknown number. Roof? Now, wary but curious, I made my way to the rooftop of my office building. Marcus was waiting for me, his face hidden in shadow. We need to talk, he said, his voice low and urgent. I approached cautiously. What's going on, Marcus? He stepped into the light, and I saw the conflict in his eyes. I can't do this anymore, Alex. I'm out. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. What are you talking about? Marcus took a deep breath. I've been working with Victoria and James. From the beginning. I'm sorry, but I can't keep lying to you. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Why? I managed to choke out. You want the truth? Marcus's eyes hardened. Because I was tired of always being second fiddle. The brilliant Alexander Hawthorne and his faithful sidekick. Well, I decided it was time to look out for myself. I fought to keep my voice steady. So what now? You're here to threaten me. Marcus nodded. Back off, Alex. Drop this whole investigation, or I'll make sure every dirty little secret from your past comes to light. The insider trading in Dubai, the bribed officials in Singapore. I've got it all documented. I stared at him, this man I considered a brother, now revealed as my enemy. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I trusted too easily, loved too freely. Never again. You're making a mistake, Marcus, I said, my voice cold. He shrugged. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Goodbye, Alex. For your sake, I hope we don't meet again. As Marcus walked away, I felt the last traces of the old Alexander Hawthorne die. In his place stood a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I turned to leave the rooftop, my mind already formulating new plans. A sharp crack split the air, and I felt a searing pain in my shoulder. I dove for cover as more shots rang out. Clutching my bleeding arm, I scrambled for the roof access door. My attacker's footsteps echoed behind me. I staggered down the stairs, my vision blurring from the pain and blood loss. I made it to the parking garage, fumbling for my car keys. As I peeled out of the lot, I saw a figure in the rearview mirror, James Sinclair, his face twisted with rage. I drove aimlessly, my mind racing. The game had changed. They were done with subtlety, willing to resort to outright murder. I needed to disappear, to regroup and plan my next move. As I felt consciousness slipping away, I made a decision. It was time to go off the grid. Time to become the monster they thought I was. With the last of my strength, I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "It's done," I rasped. "Initiate Protocol Omega." As darkness claimed me, I allowed myself a smile. I woke to the steady beep of a heart monitor, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Sarah stood by the window, her posture tense. "Welcome back to the land of the living," she said, turning to face me. "You've been out for 3 days." I tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in my shoulder. "What happened?" Sarah's expression was, "A lot. The assassination attempt made the news. You're officially a fugitive now, wanted for questioning in connection with Victoria's death." My blood ran cold. "Victoria's dead?" She nodded. "Found in your home, apparent. But the circumstances are suspicious." I closed my eyes, processing the information. Despite everything, a part of me mourned for the woman I'd once loved. But I couldn't afford sentiment now. "We need to move," I said, swinging my legs off the bed. "It's not safe here." Sarah put a hand on my uninjured shoulder, pushing me back down. "Not yet. You need to rest. Besides, this safe house is secure. We have time to plan our next move." Over the next few days, as I recovered, Sarah filled me in on the developments. Detective Sarah Chen had been assigned to Victoria's case, and she was proving to be more thorough than James and his cronies had anticipated. "Chen's good," Sarah said, reviewing the detective's file. "She's not buying the official story. If we play this right, she could be an ally." I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. "What about Evelyn? Have you heard from her?" Sarah shook her head. "Nothing since the night of the attempt on your life. She's gone to ground, probably trying to protect her cover." As soon as I was strong enough, we left the safe house, moving under cover of darkness to a series of nondescript motels and abandoned buildings. Always moving, always watching our backs. One night, as we pored over documents in a dimly lit motel room, Sarah's phone buzzed. Her face paled as she read the message. "What is it?" I demanded. "It's worse than we thought," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The money laundering operation, it's connected to a human trafficking ring. Children, Alexander. They're trafficking children." I felt sick to my stomach. The depths of depravity we were dealing with seemed bottomless. "We need to end this. Now." Sarah nodded, her eyes hardening with resolve. "I have a contact in the FBI. If we can get solid evidence linking James and the others to this trafficking ring, we can bring the whole operation down." We worked tirelessly, following leads, hacking into secure servers, and piecing together the puzzle. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that this conspiracy reached into the highest levels of government and business. As we closed in on the final piece of evidence we needed, I received an unexpected call. The number was blocked, but I knew instantly who it was. "Victoria." I breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Alexander, listen to me." Her voice was urgent, tinged with fear. "I don't have much time. You were right about everything. James, Marcus, they're planning something big. Something terrible. I can't be a part of it anymore. Where are you?" I demanded. "We can protect you." "No, it's too late for that," she said, her voice breaking. "But I can't help you stop them. Meet me at our old apartment in an hour. I'll tell you everything." The line went dead. I turned to Sarah, my heart racing. It was Victoria. "She's alive and wants to meet. She says she has information that can bring down James and Marcus." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "It could be a trap." "No," I said, already moving towards the door. "But it's a risk we have to take. This might be our only chance to get the evidence we need." Sarah grabbed my arm. "Alexander, think about this. You're a wanted man. If you're seen, then I won't be seen. I cut her off. I'll go alone. You monitor from here. If anything goes wrong, you know what to do. She nodded reluctantly. Be careful. And Alexander, don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. Victoria's betrayed you before. I gave her a smile. Trust me, there's nothing left to betray. The city streets were eerily quiet as I made my way to our old apartment. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. As I approached the building, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure darting into the alleyway. My instincts screamed danger, but I pressed on. I had to know the truth. The apartment was dark when I entered, musty with disuse. Victoria, I called softly. No answer. I moved cautiously through the rooms, my senses on high alert. In the bedroom, a shaft of moonlight illuminated a familiar silhouette. Victoria, I breathed. She turned, and I saw the tears glistening on her cheeks. Alexander, I didn't think you'd come. You said you had information. I said, keeping my distance. About James and Marcus. She nodded, reaching for her purse. It's all here. Everything you need to bring them down. The trafficking ring, the money laundering, all of it. As she handed me a USB drive, our fingers brushed. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd once loved. Why now? I asked. Why help me after everything? Victoria's face crumpled. Because I can't live with what I've done, what I've become. This is my only chance at redemption. She stepped closer, her hand reaching for my face. I'm so sorry, Alexander. For everything. I caught her wrist, my grip firm but not cruel. It's too late for apologies, Victoria. But thank you for this. It might just save both our lives. A sound from the hallway made us both freeze. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets. Victoria's eyes widened in fear. You have to go. No, they must have followed me. I hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and a reluctance to leave her behind. Go, she hissed, pushing me towards the window. I'll hold them off. It's the least I can do. With one last look at the woman who had been my wife, my partner, my betrayer, I slipped out onto the fire escape. As I descended, I heard the crash of the apartment door being broken down. Shouts, gunshot, then silence. I wanted to go back to see what had happened, but I knew I couldn't. Victoria had given me the key to bringing down the entire operation. I couldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. I made it back to the safe house just as dawn was breaking. Sarah took one look at my face and knew something had gone terribly wrong. What happened? She demanded. I handed her the USB drive. Victoria came through. But I think she might be dead. Sarah's face softened with sympathy, but her voice remained steady. We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to see what's on this drive. As we pored over the files, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I felt my blood run cold as I read the headline. Victoria Hawthorne found dead in apparent. The article painted a damning picture. My recent erratic behavior, our public arguments, the evidence of my involvement in financial crimes. To the world, I now looked like a desperate man who had driven his wife to. They're framing you, Sarah said, her voice tight with anger. This is their end game. I nodded, a cold fury settling over me. Then let's make sure it's the last game they ever play. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly, correlating the information from Victoria's drive with our own findings. The picture that emerged was staggering in its scope and depravity. As we were putting the final pieces together, Sarah received a call from one of her contacts in the police department. Alexander, she said, her face grave. They've assigned a new detective to Victoria's case. Saracen. She's got a reputation for being incorruptible and relentless. I felt a glimmer of hope. Can we trust her? Sarah shook her head. Not yet. But my source says she's not buying the official story. She's digging deeper, asking questions that are making James and his cronies nervous. I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. Then we need to find a way to get our evidence to her, without exposing ourselves. As we strategized, a breaking news alert flashed across the TV screen. My face stared back at me, determined. Alexander Hawthorne wanted for questioning in wife's death. Sarah switched off the TV, her expression grim. We're out of time. We need to move. Now, we packed quickly, destroying anything that could be traced back to us. As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around the room that had been our base of operations. This ends now, I said, my voice hard with resolve. One way or another, we're taking them all down. Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination. Together, as we slipped out into the night, I felt a strange sense of freedom. I had lost everything: my wife, my company, my reputation. But in losing it all, I had gained something far more valuable: clarity of purpose. The dingy motel room reeked of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. I paced the worn carpet, my mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. Sarah sat at the rickety desk, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard. We need more allies, I said, breaking the tense silence. People we can trust. Sarah looked up, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. I've reached out to some old contacts. Ex-intelligence, mostly. People who owe me favors or have a grudge against the system. They're our best bet for now. I nodded, appreciating her resourcefulness. Good. What about insiders? Anyone in James and Marcus's network who might be willing to turn? A knock at the door froze us both. Sarah reached for her gun, but I held up a hand. 3 quick taps, followed by 2 slow ones. Our prearranged signal. I opened the door to reveal a haggard-looking Olivia Sinclair. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep or too many tears. Maybe both. I can't do this anymore, she said, pushing past me into the room. I can't live with the guilt. Sarah tensed, her hand still on her weapon. What are you doing here, Olivia? How did you find us? Olivia sank onto the bed, her shoulders slumping. I've been watching, listening. James, he's paranoid. He has people following everyone he thinks might betray him, including me. I exchanged a glance with Sarah. This could be a trap, but my instincts told me Olivia was genuine. Why come to us now? Olivia reached into her purse and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. This is James's personal ledger. It details everything. The money laundering, the trafficking ring, all of it. Including, she swallowed hard, including what really happened to Victoria. I took the book, my hands steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. Tell me. It was Olivia whispered. Marcus, he killed her. James ordered it when he found out she was planning to expose them. The room fell silent. I leafed through the ledger, my mind cataloging names, dates, amounts. It was a goldmine of information, enough to bring down not just James and Marcus, but their entire network. Why should we trust you? Sarah asked, her voice hard. You've been part of this from the beginning. Olivia looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Because I have nothing left to lose. James is planning to eliminate me, just like he did Victoria. This is my only chance at redemption. And maybe it's a way to make things right. I studied her for a long moment, weighing her words against the risk. Finally, I nodded. All right, but from now on, you do exactly as we say. One wrong move, and you're on your own. Understood. Olivia nodded, relief washing over her face. Thank you. I won't let you down. As Sarah began to grill Olivia for more details, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message. It was from one of our surveillance programs, set to monitor police communications. We've got a problem, I said, interrupting their conversation. Detective Sarah Chin is asking questions, digging into inconsistencies in the official story. Sarah frowned. That could work in our favor. If she's not buying the frame job, she might be open to the truth. I shook my head. It's too risky. We can't trust anyone in law enforcement right now. Maybe we don't have to, Olivia interjected. I've heard James talking about Chin. He's worried about her. Apparently, she has a daughter, Zoe, a hacker with a record. James was considering using her as leverage. A plan began to form in my mind. A hacker, you say? That could be useful. Sarah, can you find this Zoe Chin? Sarah nodded, already typing. On it. But Alexander, we need to be careful. If we involve Chin's daughter, we're putting her at risk too. I know, I said, but we're running out of options. And time. Over the next few days, we moved from safe house to safe house, always one step ahead of our pursuers. Sarah's contacts came through with information and resources, while Olivia's insider knowledge proved invaluable in anticipating James and Marcus's moves. We had several close calls. Once, we barely escaped a raid on our hideout, slipping out through a hidden tunnel moments before James's men burst in. Another time, I found myself in a brutal hand-to-hand fight with one of Marcus's thugs in a back alley. I emerged victorious, but with bruised ribs and a renewed appreciation for Sarah's combat training. Through it all, we pieced together the full scope of the conspiracy. The ledger, combined with our own investigations, painted a picture of corruption and criminality that reached the highest levels of government and business. The list of crimes seemed endless. We need to take this public, I said one night as we pored over our evidence. It's the only way to ensure they can't sweep it under the rug. Sarah nodded, her face grim. Agreed. But we need to do it in a way that leaves no room for doubt. No loose ends they can use to discredit us. Olivia, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. I might have an idea. James is hosting a big political fundraiser next week. All the major players will be there. If we could expose everything in front of the media and the city's elite, I felt a surge of anticipation. It's risky, but it could work. Sarah, what do you think? She considered for a moment, then nodded. It's our best shot, but we'll need help. Someone who can breach their security systems, access their communications in real time. Zoe Chin, I said, remembering our earlier conversation. Think she'd be willing to help us? Sarah's expression was doubtful. It's a long shot. But at this point, what do we have to lose? As we began to formulate our plan, I felt a sense of satisfaction. James, Marcus, and their entire corrupt network had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won, that they had broken me and buried the truth. The week leading up to the fundraiser was a whirlwind of preparation and calculated risks. We'd managed to make contact with Zoe Chin, appealing to her desire to make amends with her mother and her own sense of justice. After some initial skepticism, she agreed to help us. I can get you into their systems, Zoe said during one of our secure video calls. But once I'm in, you'll have a limited window before they detect the intrusion. Maybe 30 minutes tops. I nodded, understanding the stakes. That should be enough. Just make sure you're ready when we give the signal. As the day of the fundraiser approached, we fine-tuned every aspect of our plan. Sarah and her contacts provided us with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment and fake identities that would get us past the initial security checks. Olivia gave us a detailed layout of the venue and the guest list, allowing us to identify key targets and potential allies. The night before the operation, I stood alone on the balcony of our latest safe house, staring out at the city lights. Tomorrow, it would all be over, one way or another. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see Sarah. Having second thoughts? She asked, joining me at the railing. I shook my head. No, just thinking about how far we've come, how much we've lost. Sarah's hand found mine, squeezing gently. We've gained something too, Alexander. A chance to make things right, to bring these bastards to justice. I nodded, appreciating her steadfast support. You're right. Let's finish this. The next evening, I stood before a mirror, adjusting my disguise. The man staring back at me was a far cry from the polished business tycoon I'd once been. But beneath the altered features and the cheap suit, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Ready? Sarah asked, her own disguise transforming her into a nondescript caterer. I nodded, slipping a small earpiece into place. Let's go catch some rats. We entered the fundraiser separately, blending in with a crowd of guests and staff. I scanned the room, noting the positions of James, Marcus, and other key players. Olivia was there too, looking nervous but determined. I'm in, Zoe's voice crackled in my ear. You've got 28 minutes before their security protocols kick me out. Understood, I murmured, making my way toward the bar. Start the file transfer. As Zoe began uploading our evidence to the venue's main screens and sound system, I maneuvered through the crowd, planting small devices that would disrupt communications and lock down exits when activated. I was so focused on my task that I almost missed the flash of movement in my peripheral vision. A man I didn't recognize was making a beeline for Marcus, his hand reaching inside his jacket. "Sarah," I hissed into my comm, "we've got a problem. Possible hitman near the east entrance." "I see him," she replied. "Olivia, can you create a distraction?" Moments later, there was a crash of breaking glass, followed by Olivia's exaggerated apologies. In the ensuing commotion, Sarah smoothly intercepted the hitman, leading him away with a firm grip on his arm. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my respite was short-lived. James was looking around suspiciously, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the crowd. He was starting to sense something was off. "Zoe, we need to move now," I said urgently. "How much longer?" "2 minutes," she replied, her voice tense. "But they're on to me. I'm fighting off their security team." I cursed under my breath. We were so close. I couldn't let it fall apart now. Making a split-second decision, I abandoned my position and strode purposefully toward the stage where James was preparing to give his speech. It was time to improvise. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying across the room, "I think it's time we heard the truth about our esteemed host and his associates." James's head snapped up, his eyes widening in recognition and fury. "Security," he bellowed. "Stop that man." But it was too late. The screens around the room flickered to life, displaying damning evidence of James and Marcus's crimes. Financial records, surveillance footage, transcripts of incriminating conversations. It was all there for everyone to see. The room erupted into chaos. Guests gasped and shouted. Security personnel looked around in confusion, unsure who to restrain. I locked eyes with James, seeing the realization dawn that his carefully constructed empire was crumbling around him. "It's over, James," I said, my voice carrying over the din time to face the music. With a roar of rage, James lunged at me, his fist connecting with my jaw. We grappled, crashing into tables and sending glasses shattering to the floor. I fought back, years of pent-up anger and betrayal fueling my strikes. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus making a break for the exit. But Olivia was there, her foot extended just enough to send him sprawling. As he scrambled to his feet, the doors burst open, revealing Detective Sarah Chin and a team of officers. "NYPD," Chin shouted. Nobody moved. As the police swarmed the room, I pinned James to the ground, my knee pressing into his back. "You're finished," I growled. "You and your whole corrupt network." James twisted his head, glaring up at me with pure hatred. "You think this is over? You have no idea how deep this goes. I'll be out before you know it, and when I am." His threats were cut short as Detective Chin approached, handcuffs at the ready. "Alexander Hawthorne," she said, her voice neutral. "We need to talk." I stood slowly, releasing James to the custody of Chin's officers. "I'm all ears, Detective. But first, I think you'll want to see what's on those screens." It's quite the story. As Chin's eyes widened at the evidence before her, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. The trap had been sprung, and the truth was finally coming to light. The aftermath of the fundraiser was a whirlwind of activity. Police swarmed the venue, arresting James, Marcus, and several of their associates. Reporters clamored for statements, their cameras flashing incessantly. In the midst of the chaos, I found myself face to face with Detective Chin. "You got a lot of explaining to do, Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her expression a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect. I nodded, feeling the weight of the past months lifting from my shoulders. "I'm ready to tell you everything, Detective. But first, there's someone you should meet." I led Chen to a quiet corner where Sarah and Zoe were waiting. The detective's eyes widened in recognition. "Zoe? What you doing here?" Zoe stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "Helping to bring down a criminal empire, Mom." "You're welcome." Chin's stern expression softened for a moment before she turned back to me. "All right, Hawthorne. Start talking." Over the next hour, I laid out the entire story, Victoria's betrayal, the money laundering scheme, the human, and our efforts to expose it all. Chen listened intently, her face growing grimmer with each revelation. "This goes beyond anything we imagined," she said when I finished. "But why didn't you come to us sooner? Would you have believed me? I asked. With all the evidence they'd fabricated against me, Chin conceded the point with a nod. Fair enough. But you're not off the hook yet. We'll need your full cooperation to build a case against James and his network. You'll have it, I promised. Every shred of evidence, every witness statement, whatever it takes to bring them down. As Chen moved away to coordinate with her team, I felt a presence at my side. It was Sarah, her disguise now discarded. It's not over yet, she said quietly. James wasn't lying when he said this goes deep. There will be people trying to bury this to protect themselves. I nodded. Then we'll dig deeper. We'll follow every lead, expose every corrupt official and dirty businessman, no matter how long it takes. Sarah's eyes gleamed with approval. I was hoping you'd say that, because there's something I need to tell you. She led me to a quiet corner, away from prying ears. My real name isn't Sarah Evans. I'm Agent Evelyn Blackwood, with an international task force investigating global human rights. I've been undercover for years, working to infiltrate and dismantle operations like James's. I stared at her, processing this new information. So everything, our partnership, Evelyn held up a hand. My mission was real. My commitment to bringing down these criminals is real. And my feelings. She paused, her expression softening. Those are real, too. Before I could respond, a commotion broke out across the room. Marcus, who had been sitting quietly in handcuffs, suddenly leapt to his feet. It was me, he shouted, his face contorted with a mixture of fear and desperation. I killed Victoria. James ordered it, but I did it. She was going to expose us all. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Marcus as he continued his confession. She found out about the trafficking ring, threatened to go to the authorities. James said she had to be silenced. I thought I was protecting our interests, but I was wrong. God, I was so wrong. I felt a cold fury settle over me as I listened to Marcus's words. Victoria's final moments, her attempt to make things right, all snuffed out by the very people she'd once called friends. Detective Chin stepped forward, her face grim. Marcus Reeves, you're under arrest of Victoria Hawthorne. You have the right to remain silent. As Chen read Marcus his rights, I turned to Evelyn. What happens now? She smiled, a hint of excitement in her eyes. Now we take this global. My task force has been waiting for a break like this. With the evidence we've gathered and your insider knowledge, we can unravel trafficking networks across continents. I consider her words, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. You're offering me a job. More than that, Evelyn said. I'm offering you a chance to use your skills for good, to make a real difference in the world. What do you say? As I looked around the room, at James and Marcus in handcuffs, at the evidence of their crimes displayed for all to see, at the faces of those who had worked tirelessly to bring this moment about, I felt a surge of pride and determination. I turned back to Evelyn, my decision made. I'm in. Let's take these bastards down, all of them. She nodded. Welcome to the team, Alexander. Over the next few hours, we worked with Detective Chin and her team to secure the evidence and begin processing the arrested conspirators. James and Marcus were led away in separate police cars, their faces a mixture of rage and defeat. As the sun began to rise, I found myself standing with Evelyn, Detective Chin, and Olivia. I can't thank you enough for your help, Chin said, addressing all of us. This case, it's going to shake the foundations of our city. Maybe even the country. Olivia, who had been quiet throughout the night, spoke up. What happens now? To me, Chin's expression softened slightly. You'll need to testify, Miss Sinclair. But your cooperation will be taken into account. I can't promise anything, but we'll do what we can. As Olivia nodded, tears in her eyes, I felt a sense of closure. The web of lies and deceit that had entangled all of us was finally unraveling. Evelyn touched my arm. We should go. There's a lot of work ahead of us. I nodded, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As we walked away from the scene, leaving the flashing police lights and bustling activity behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The long night was over, and a new day was dawning. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of my rebuilt mansion. So much had changed in the past year, yet in many ways I felt more like myself than ever before. The trial of James, Marcus, and their co-conspirators had been a media sensation, exposing the depth of corruption within the political and business world. The revelations had sent shockwaves through society, leading to widespread reforms and a renewed commitment to justice. My name had been cleared, my reputation restored. But more importantly, I had found a new purpose. Working with Evelyn and her international task force had opened my eyes to a world I'd only glimpsed before. We'd taken down trafficking rings across 3 continents, freed hundreds of victims, and brought countless criminals to justice. It was challenging, often dangerous work, but I'd never felt more alive. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Olivia enter, a tentative smile on her face. "The board meeting is about to start," she said. "Are you ready?" I nodded, grabbing my jacket. "Let's do this." Together, we formed a foundation dedicated to helping victims of human and fighting exploitation. It was our way of honoring Victoria's memory and trying to right some of the wrongs we'd been part of. As we drove to the office, I thought about how far we'd all come. Olivia had served a short sentence for her role in the conspiracy, but her cooperation and subsequent dedication to the foundation had earned her a second chance. Detective Chen and Zoe had reconciled, their shared experience bringing them closer than ever. And me? I was a changed man. The ruthless businessman was still there, but now that drive was channeled into fighting for justice, into making the world a little bit better. The Foundation's offices were buzzing with activity when we arrived. As I made my way to the conference room, I saw faces both familiar and new, former victims now working as advocates, lawyers dedicated to prosecuting traffickers, researchers developing new methods to combat exploitation. Just before I entered the boardroom, my phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn, new lead on the Singapore operation. Briefing tomorrow at 0800. Ready for another adventure. I smiled, feeling a familiar thrill of anticipation. This was my life now, balancing my business acumen with my newfound calling, always ready for the next challenge. As I took my seat at the head of the table, preparing to lead the meeting, I thought about the price of revenge and the value of truth. The path that had led me here had been dark and treacherous, filled with betrayal and loss. But it had also led to redemption, to purpose, to a chance to make a real difference in the world. I looked out at the faces around the table, each person committed to our shared mission. "All right," I said, my voice strong and clear. "Let's get started. We've got work to do." The meeting began, and with it, another day in my new life. The past was behind me, the future uncertain but full of potential, and I was ready for whatever came next. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its light over the awakening city, I felt a sense of anticipation. There were still battles to be fought, injustices to be righted, lives to be saved. And I would be there, in the thick of it all, using every skill and resource at my disposal to make a difference. The game of revenge was over. The real work had just begun. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.